We thought it would be useful to look at some of the questions that we've been asked over the last few years. One of the questions we regularly are asked is what type of training skills managers should have. They're not specialist trainers, but they are expected to train others, for example, in the workshop.
There may be a mix of training skills required for people involved in different types of training. For managers giving presentations, maybe facilitating a session with a small team, then group training skills are a good option. For managers doing one-to-one training, we would look at how to plan training, demonstration and instruction techniques. In some cases, coaching and mentoring may be a better option.
For people working in a factory or shop floor who are training team members on the job, is a Train the Trainer course relevant to them?
We increasingly find that companies recognise that they are very dependent upon on-the-job training. As part of this, they realise that the supervisors need some training themselves. A good example relating to this was when we recently helped a company who supplied tools to be used offshore. The tools were failing too often. When the company started to look at why this was happening, they found that the problem started in the workshop. The guys preparing the tools in the workshop were not being trained properly. We delivered a 3-day programme for the supervisors who were responsible for training and assessing their teams. We slowed the whole programme right down to get these guys to really work hard and actually get hands-on as much as possible. So there was a big ladder for them to climb, but they got to the point where they needed to be at. It was also quite challenging but enjoyable working with international delegates.
In what sort of circumstances do people need a formal Train the Trainer qualification, as opposed to just standalone workshops?
It depends on the circumstances. Sometimes for compliance purposes you might need a qualification. This is very common in the food and drink industry where you may have regular client audits. Another example where qualifications are required would be with informal safety training, such as manual handling training. Then some clients choose a qualification option to help with gaining buy-in from the people involved in the training, especially where they want them to take on a more formal role.
How do you tackle the issue of getting buy-in during the course and application after the course?
I always think of learning as very similar to shopping. You can get people in the shop but they don't want to buy, and even when they do buy, do they use it afterwards? We deal with the first part on a daily basis, i.e. trying to get the buy-in. In the case of Train the Trainer work we're talking about here, we find that a lot of the guys are very nervous about doing presentations, and we'll have to work hard to get them through the first hurdle. We do this by creating a safe and friendly environment. We're also very careful with how we handle the feedback. Initially, we tend to focus on what they're doing right, and we encourage them to evaluate themselves. And we sometimes need to be more cautious with the developmental feedback they need. What also works is getting them back on the floor to do it a second, third time quickly as possible. All the subsequent barriers that happen in the workshop are relatively easy to overcome. Sometimes the more experienced trainers who are more challenging when it comes to taking on the feedback and making changes to their style. The other challenge is what happens after our training input is finished. One client we have was setting up their own training academy, and part of this was our input getting their training up to speed. I think we can do so much, but then the client might need to continue the process and do a bit of hand-holding.
One of the questions we get asked is, if I send people on a training course, will they really be any better when they come back?
We practice what we preach in this instance, i.e. getting the guys doing as much practical work as possible and giving them feedback. As a result, you can see the clear difference with at least half the guys when they walk out the door. In some cases, change is quite dramatic, especially with some of the less experienced people. An example of the approach we have been talking about is a programme that we've been running for many years. The Train the Trainer programme that had been in place previously was producing disappointing results. We were asked to take over, so we went back to basics with the guys. They prepared a presentation before the training, and we ironed out all the basic mistakes they were making. We got them onto a platform where they could progress their presentation, communication and training skills. The client was delighted with the improvement made within the programme.
We do get asked for a practical training course with little theory. What would you recommend?
There are different options, but we often use the Institute of Leadership and Management route. This gives us a flexible structure which lets us keep pushing the guys into doing practical work. They spend their time practicing their training skills rather than us overloading them with ideas and theory.